Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Phyllis Summers had always prided herself on being the smartest person in the room, the one who noticed what others missed, the woman who could smell a lie before it ever had a chance to grow legs and walk away. But tonight, standing alone in the dim glow of the Grand Phoenix bar after closing hours, she felt something far more dangerous than anger or jealousy. She felt doubt, the kind that gnawed at the bones and whispered that the truth was being kept from her on purpose, and that realization made her pulse race as she replayed Kane Ashby's words over and over in her head, the careful pauses, the way his eyes shifted just a fraction too late, the way his voice tightened when she casually mentioned Lily's name, because Phyllis knew Kane well enough to recognize guilt when she saw it, and whatever secret he was sitting on had weight, history, and consequences written all over it. She had gone looking for answers the way Phyllis always did. Head first, unapologetic and relentless, starting with subtle questions that were never really subtle, then escalating into pointed accusations disguised as jokes, but Kane had danced around her with a politeness that felt rehearsed, almost desperate, and that alone set off every alarm bell she had. Phyllis wasn't used to being shut out, especially not by a man who once poured his heart out to her during late-night conversations fueled by regret and too much bourbon. And as she leaned against the bar, fingers tightening around a glass she hadn't bothered to fill, she admitted to herself that this wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was obsession, because the truth had a way of exposing everything else that had been festering beneath the surface. The next morning, Phyllis didn't wait for an invitation. She showed up at Kane's suite at the athletic club unannounced, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor like a countdown to confrontation. Her expression already set in that familiar mix of confidence and barely restrained fury. Kane opened the door looking like a man who hadn't slept, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed, and for a split second before either of them spoke, the silence between them told Phyllis everything she needed to know. He was hiding something big. She pushed past him without asking, making herself at home as she always did, turning to face him with her arms crossed and her chin lifted, daring him to lie to her face again. "What did you do, Kane?" she asked softly, dangerously calm, because Phyllis at her quietest was always at her most terrifying. Kane swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair as if he could physically shake the truth loose without actually saying it, and that hesitation was the final straw. Phyllis stepped closer, invading his space, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. "Don't insult me by pretending this is nothing," she continued, her voice rising just enough to crack the calm facade she'd been holding onto. "I know you. I know when you're lying and I know when you're scared. So tell me, what are you so afraid I'll find out?" Kane tried to deflect, muttering something about protecting people, about things being complicated, but Phyllis laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that cut through the room like glass. "Complicated," she snapped. "That's your excuse? You don't get to decide what I can handle." She paced the room, her mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last, until finally she stopped and turned back to him, her eyes blazing. "Is this about Lily?" she asked, watching his reaction carefully, and when his jaw tightened just slightly, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That was when Phyllis realized this wasn't just about Kane anymore. This was about history, about betrayal, about wounds that had never fully healed, and the idea that Kane had been sitting on a truth involving Lily, something that could change everything, sent her spiraling into a place she hadn't been in a long time. She left without another word, storming out as Kane called after her. But she didn't stop, didn't look back, because she knew if she stayed another second, she might explode, and she needed answers before she lost control completely. Over the next few days, Phyllis went into full investigation mode, digging through conversations, piecing together timelines, replaying every interaction she'd had with Kane over the past few months, until a pattern began to emerge. Missed calls late at night, sudden business trips that didn't quite add up, guarded looks whenever Lily's name came up. She confronted anyone she thought might know something, from Nick to Devon, but every door slammed shut just as she reached for the handle, fueling her paranoia and her anger in equal measure. It wasn't just that no one was talking. It was that everyone seemed to be protecting the same secret. By the time she cornered Kane again, this time at Chancellor Winters, Phyllis was done playing nice. She followed him into an empty conference room, slammed the door shut behind them, and demanded the truth with a ferocity that left no room for evasion. "I know it's about Lily," she said flatly. "And I know it's bad. So you're going to tell me right now? Or I'm going to make sure everyone finds out whatever it is you're trying to hide." Cain looked at her like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, torn between jumping and being pushed, and for a moment Phyllis almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then he spoke, his voice low and trembling, and everything changed. He didn't give her all the details, not at first, but he gave her enough to confirm her worst fears. A secret decision made months ago, one that involved Lily's future, one that had been kept from her to protect her. And the betrayal embedded in that choice hit Phyllis like a punch to the gut. She staggered back, shaking her head in disbelief, anger boiling over into something wild and uncontrollable, and before Cain could finish explaining himself, she cut him off, her voice cracking as she finally said the three words that had been building inside her like a loaded weapon. "I know everything." The room went silent, the weight of those three words hanging between them like a verdict. Cain's face drained of color, his eyes wide with shock and something dangerously close to panic, because those words weren't just an accusation, they were a declaration of war. Phyllis wasn't bluffing, and Cain knew it. Whatever fragile control he'd been clinging to shattered in that moment, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. "You don't," Cain whispered, his voice breaking. "You think you do, but you don't." He looked up at her then, desperation etched into every line of his face. "And if you did, you'd understand why I couldn't tell you." Phyllis laughed again, but this time there were tears in her eyes, her emotions swinging wildly between rage and heartbreak. "Don't you dare tell me what I'd understand," she shot back. "You took that choice away from me. From Lily. From everyone." She stepped closer, lowering her voice as she delivered the final blow. "Those three words? They're not just about what I know. They're about what I'm going to do." Cain stood abruptly, his composure finally cracking as panic set in. "You can't," he said. "If this gets out, it will destroy her." His voice trembled, and for the first time, Phyllis saw genuine fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for the fallout his secret would cause. And that scared her more than anything else, because it meant the truth was even bigger than she'd imagined. For a brief moment, Phyllis hesitated, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. But then she remembered every lie, every half-truth, every time she'd been treated like she couldn't handle reality, and her resolve hardened. "You should have thought about that before you lied," she said coldly. "This isn't on me. It's on you." As she walked out, leaving Cain alone with his unraveling world, Phyllis felt a strange mix of triumph and dread, because she knew what came next would change everything. Secrets in Genoa City never stayed buried for long, and once the truth was out, there would be no going back. No undoing the damage, no pretending things could return to the way they were. Those three words had set something irreversible in motion, and as Phyllis stepped into the elevator, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger, she realized she wasn't just exposing a secret. She was igniting a chain reaction that would tear through Cain, Lily, and everyone caught in between. And somewhere deep down, beneath the chaos and the anger, Phyllis knew one undeniable truth. Whatever happened next, nothing in Genoa City would ever be the same again. The elevator doors slid shut behind Phyllis Summers, but the quiet hum of the descent did nothing to calm the storm raging inside her. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, eyes blazing, jaw tight, lips pressed into a thin line that trembled despite her effort to stay composed. She had said the words. Those three words. And now there was no undoing them. "I know everything." They echoed in her mind like a gunshot that never stopped reverberating. Phyllis had lived her life on instinct, on impulse, on the belief that truth, no matter how brutal, was always better than silence. But even she had to admit that this truth felt heavier, darker, as though it carried consequences far beyond what she had imagined when she first started digging. By the time she reached the lobby, her phone was already buzzing in her hand. Missed calls, messages, names she expected and some she didn't. Nick, Jack, even Lily. Phyllis didn't listen to any of them. Not yet. She needed space to think, to piece together what Cain had admitted and, more importantly, what he had still refused to say out loud. Because Cain Ashby wasn't just hiding a mistake, he was hiding a choice. A choice made behind closed doors, one that had altered lives without consent, And that, to Phyllis, was the ultimate betrayal. Across town, Kane sat alone in the conference room at Chancellor Winter's, staring at the door Phyllis had slammed shut minutes earlier. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He had always known this moment would come. Secrets like his didn't stay buried forever in Genoa City. They festered, they grew, and eventually they exploded. But he had hoped, foolishly, that when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't be through Phyllis Summers, the one person who never let anything go once she had her teeth in it. Her words replayed in his head, stripping away every rationalization he had used to justify his silence. Protection, love, fear. None of it sounded convincing anymore. He thought of Lily, of the way she smiled when she believed everything in her world was finally stable, of how hard she had fought for peace after years of heartbreak. Kane had told himself that keeping the truth from her was an act of mercy, that she didn't need another bomb dropped on her life. But deep down he knew the real reason. He was afraid. Afraid of losing her respect. Afraid of watching her walk away. And now, because of that fear, he stood on the brink of losing everything anyway. Phyllis didn't go home. Instead, she drove aimlessly through Genoa City, memories flashing through her mind with every familiar street. She thought about all the times she had been lied to, manipulated, underestimated. She thought about the cost of truth and the even greater cost of silence. By the time she pulled into the parking lot at Crimson Lights, the sky was dark, and her nerves were shot. She ordered a coffee she didn't drink, her fingers wrapped around the cup as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. That was when Lily walked in. Phyllis felt her chest tighten as Lily crossed the room, her expression open, unsuspecting. The last person who deserved to be caught in the crossfire of Kane's deception. Lily smiled when she saw Phyllis, a warm, genuine smile that made guilt twist sharply in Phyllis's stomach. For a fleeting moment, she considered keeping quiet, walking away, letting Kane carry his secret alone a little longer. But then she remembered Kane's fear, the way his voice had cracked, and she knew this truth would come out whether she delivered it gently or not. "Hey," Lily said, sitting down across from her. "You okay? You look tense." Phyllis forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do I ever look relaxed?" she replied lightly, buying herself a few seconds. Lily laughed softly, but her eyes searched Phyllis's face, sensing something off. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable, until Lily finally spoke again. "Did something happen with Kane?" she asked. There it was. The opening Phyllis hadn't planned but somehow needed. She took a slow breath, her heart pounding, and met Lily's gaze. "You deserve honesty," Phyllis said quietly. "And I don't say that lightly." Lily's smile faded, concern replacing it. "Phyllis, you're scaring me." "Good," Phyllis thought bitterly. "Because the truth should scare you." Before she could say another word, Lily's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing. "It's Kane," she said, standing. "I should take this." Phyllis watched her walk away, relief and dread crashing together. Part of her was glad for the interruption. The other part knew it only delayed the inevitable. Lily returned moments later, her face pale. "He wants to see me," Lily said. "Says it's important." Phyllis nodded slowly. "It is." Lily studied her, suspicion flickering. "What's going on?" Phyllis stood, gathering her things. "Just promise me you'll hear him out. And remember, whatever he tells you, he didn't mean to hurt you." The words felt hollow even as she said them. That night, Lily confronted Kane in their living room, the tension thick enough to choke on. Kane paced while Lily stood her ground, arms crossed, demanding answers. He tried to ease into it, to soften the blow, but Lily wasn't in the mood for vague explanations. She wanted the truth, all of it, and she wanted it now. When Kane finally confessed, when he admitted the full scope of what he had hidden, the decision he had made without her, the ripple effect it had already caused, Lily felt the world tilt. The man she loved, the man she trusted, had taken away her agency in the name of protection, and that realization hurt more than the secret itself. Tears streamed down her face as anger and heartbreak collided, and Kane could do nothing but watch as the consequences of his silence unfolded in real time. Meanwhile, Phyllis sat alone in her car outside, staring at the house, knowing exactly what was happening inside. She hated herself for being right. She hated Kane for putting her in this position. And most of all, she hated the fact that part of her felt vindicated. Because the truth, as devastating as it was finally out. The next day, Genoa City buzzed with whispers. Secrets had a way of leaking, and this one spilled fast. Jack cornered Phyllis at Jabot, demanding to know what she had done. Nick confronted her with a mix of anger and concern, torn between supporting her and questioning her judgment. Phyllis took it all, standing firm, refusing to apologize for exposing a lie that should never have existed in the first place. "I didn't destroy anything," she told them both. "I exposed it. There's a difference." Kane, on the other hand, found himself increasingly isolated. Lily barely spoke to him, her trust shattered, her heart bruised. Every attempt he made to fix things only seemed to make them worse. He realized too late that protecting someone by lying wasn't protection at all. It was control. And control was the one thing Lily would never forgive. Days passed, then weeks, and the fallout continued to spread. Alliances shifted. Old wounds reopened. Phyllis watched it all unfold with a strange sense of inevitability. She hadn't expected gratitude, and she certainly hadn't received it, but she knew she would make the same choice again. Those 3 words had been necessary. They had been truth, raw and unfiltered, and in Genoa City, truth always came with a price. One evening, as Phyllis stood alone on the patio at the Grand Phoenix, Kane approached her, looking older, worn down by regret. "You didn't have to do it that way," he said quietly. Phyllis turned to face him, her expression calm but unyielding. "Neither did you." They stood there in silence, 2 people bound by a truth that had changed everything. And as Kane walked away, Phyllis knew this chapter wasn't over. The consequences of those 3 words would continue to ripple through their lives, reshaping relationships, exposing hidden cracks, and forcing everyone involved to confront who they really were. Because in Genoa City, the truth didn't just set you free. It demanded everything in return. The following morning, Phyllis woke to the harsh glare of sunlight cutting through her bedroom blinds, the remnants of last night's tension still clinging to her like a second skin. Genoa City had a way of forcing people awake, not just physically but morally, emotionally, and sometimes brutally. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the bitterness matching the storm still roiling inside her. Every sip reminded her of Kane, of Lily, of the fragile balance that had already shattered, and she knew that this was just the beginning. Secrets had consequences, and hers had already set the city ablaze. She made her way to Jabot, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the kind of authority that always demanded attention. Jack raised an eyebrow when he saw her, sensing that this was not going to be a casual conversation. "You've been stirring things up, Phyllis," he said, carefully neutral, trying to gauge how much chaos had been unleashed. "I didn't stir anything," Phyllis replied sharply, her voice steady. "I just made sure the truth came out." Kane and Lily needed to know what was really happening. Jack shook his head slightly, a mix of exasperation and admiration in his eyes. "Genoa City isn't kind to people who expose secrets," he said. "You know that." "I know," Phyllis said quietly, her gaze hardening. "But sometimes the people who hide the truth need a wake-up call, whether they like it or not." Meanwhile, across town, Kane wandered the halls of Chancellor Winters like a man trapped in a maze with no exit. He replayed Phyllis's 3 words over and over. "I know everything." Those words weren't just an accusation. They were a verdict, a public declaration that left no room for denial. Every misstep, every moment of hesitation, every lie he had told in the name of protection now felt like a chain tightening around his chest. And worst of all, Lily's silence had grown deafening. She wasn't angry anymore. She was distant, calculating, hurt, and Kane knew that the bridge between them had been burned in flames hotter than he could extinguish. Phyllis, however, wasn't done. She moved like a force of nature, seeking answers wherever she could, connecting dots no one else had seen. Conversations, emails, offhand remarks, they all formed a map of deception that she traced with obsessive precision. Every revelation made her pulse quicken. Every lie exposed brought a grim satisfaction tempered by the weight of its impact. Genoa City's people were fragile, often fragile enough to shatter under the strain of secrets, and Phyllis had become the instrument that fractured them, not out of malice but out of necessity. That evening, as the city lights flickered on and the streets began to buzz with life, Phyllis found herself outside Lily's apartment. She hesitated for a brief moment, hand hovering over the doorbell, remembering the look in Lily's eyes when she had left her the night before. This wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about navigating the aftermath. Truth had been revealed, but now the consequences needed to be faced head-on. When Lily opened the door, her expression was guarded but not hostile. Phyllis smiled faintly, the first hint of warmth in days. "We can't change what's been done," she said softly, "but we can decide what happens next. You deserve to know that Cain made choices he thought were right, but choices that hurt you. And you have every right to be angry, to be scared, to be whatever you need to be." Lily studied her carefully, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing, if only slightly. "It's a lot," she admitted, "and I don't know if I can forgive him, or even understand why he did it." Phyllis nodded, her eyes fierce and unwavering. "You don't have to forgive him yet, but you do have to see clearly, without lies clouding your judgment. That's what I wanted, for you, not for him." And in that quiet exchange, Phyllis realized something profound. The 3 words she had spoken didn't just shatter illusions, they forced people to face reality, to confront the choices they had made, and to understand that in Genoa City, the truth was a weapon, a shield, and sometimes the only path toward redemption. Because once the lies were stripped away, nothing would ever be the same, and everyone involved would have to reckon with the consequences of the secrets they had kept, the truths they had avoided, and the courage required to face what remained.